The screaming started at 0347 hours. Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez pressed her back against the twisted wreckage of what had been Firebase Delta 7, listening to the death cries of her unit echoing across the barren landscape of Kepler 442b. The hegemony had found him again. 3 months of guerrilla warfare. 3 months of bleeding the alien bastards dry one patrol at a time, and now it was ending like this, with plasma fire and the smell of burning human flesh. Contact left. Contact left. The voice belonged to Corporal Martinez, barely 19 and 3 systems away from his mother's kitchen in Nueva Barcelona. Elena heard his rifle chattering, heard the distinctive whine of hegemony pulse weapons answering back, heard Martinez scream once and then fall silent forever. Elena closed her eyes and counted. 15 seconds of gunfire. Silence. Then the soft, almost musical chittering that passed for hegemony communication. They were moving in. She had maybe 2 minutes before they found her hiding spot in the command bunker's collapsed entrance. Elena checked her rifle. Half a magazine left. Her sidearm, 12 rounds. 1 fragmentation grenade, its pin already loosened from when she'd almost used it on herself 2 hours ago, when the first wave hit. 2 minutes to live. After 18 years of service, 3 wars, and more confirmed kills than she cared to remember, it would end here in this godforsaken hole, 200 light-years from Earth, fighting an enemy that had already glassed half the colonies. Elena had joined the Terran Defense Corps the day after her 18th birthday, following her father's footsteps and his father's before him. The Vasquez family had bled for humanity across 4 generations of warfare. Now she would be the last, dying alone on an alien world whose purple sky had never known the warmth of soul. She thought of her daughter, Maria, safe in the orbital habitats around Mars. Safe because soldiers like Elena held the line. Safe because someone was willing to die in the dark so others could live in the light. The chittering grew closer. Elena gripped her rifle tighter and was about to move into position when something caught her eye. A faint blue glow emanating from deeper within the collapsed bunker. She'd been so focused on the approaching hegemony forces that she hadn't noticed it before. The emergency lighting had failed hours ago when they'd first hit the base. This was something else. Something that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm, like a heartbeat made of light. Elena made a decision that would either save humanity or damn it. Instead of making her final stand at the bunker entrance, she crawled deeper into the wreckage, following that impossible blue glow. The debris field opened into what had been the base's xenoarchaeology lab. Dr. Sarah Chen had been studying hegemony artifacts here, trying to understand their technology, their weaknesses. Chen was dead now. Elena had seen her body when the first shells hit, but her work remained. And in the center of the lab, untouched by the bombardment that had destroyed everything else, sat something that shouldn't exist. It was roughly spherical, about the size of a basketball, its surface covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The blue light emanated from deep within its crystalline structure, and as Elena approached, she could swear she heard something, not with her ears, but in her mind. A voice. No, voices. Thousands of them speaking in harmonies she couldn't understand but somehow felt in her bones. Sister warrior. Guardian protector. Elena jerked back, rifle raised. The voice had been clear as daylight, speaking perfect Terran standard directly into her thoughts. Elena watched. We awaited. You were the first to come alone with death song singing and battle joy burning. You are worthy. What the hell are you? Elena whispered, though she kept her weapon trained on the artifact. We are the architects. We built the great ships. We taught the children how to sing stars into life. But the children grew proud. They took our gifts and made them into weapons. Now they hunt the universe with our bones and see the hegemony. Elena understood now. This thing, these architects, they were the ones who had created the aliens that were destroying humanity. But why tell her this? Why now? Asterisk because the children have forgotten the first law. The song of creation must be balanced by the song of destruction. They create only death now. They have become error. Asterisk the chittering outside grew louder. Elena could hear debris shifting as the hegemony soldiers searched the ruins. Elena stared at the artifact, the memory core. Your life song for our purpose. Touch the memory core and we will teach you to sing their ships in the silence. Elena stared at the artifact, the memory core, and felt the weight of an impossible choice. Touch an alien device that could do anything to her mind, her soul, or die here with her finger on the trigger, taking maybe 2 or 3 of the enemy with her. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Elena reached out and placed her palm against the memory core surface. The universe exploded into light. For a moment that lasted eternity, Elena Vasquez ceased to exist anything human. She was scattered across space and time. Her consciousness merged with beings so ancient that they remembered the birth of galaxies. She saw the true history of the cosmos, not the sanitized version taught in schools, but the bloody, beautiful truth of it. The architects had been gardeners of reality, nurturing young species, teaching them to reach for the stars. But every gardener knows that sometimes you have to prune the dead wood to let new growth flourish. The hegemony had been their greatest students and their greatest failure. Given the gift of stellar engineering, they had turned it into a weapon of conquest. Given the knowledge of dimensional manipulation, they had used it to phase their ships through space-time itself. Given wisdom, they had chosen dominion. And now Elena understood how to unmake them. When awareness returned, she was still in the ruined lab, but everything had changed. The memory core had dissolved into motes of light that now flowed through her bloodstream, rewriting her at the cellular level. She could feel the architect's knowledge settling into her mind like sediment in still water. She also knew she was dying. The integration process was burning through her nervous system like acid. Maybe she had an hour before her brain shut down completely. Maybe less. But an hour would be enough. Elena could hear the hegemony soldiers in the outer chamber now. They'd found the bunker entrance. She had minutes before they breached her position. She reached for her rifle, then stopped. The weapon felt crude in her hands now, primitive as a stone axe. Why use bullets when she could sing reality itself? Elena looked at the wall separating her from her enemies and spoke a word that had no translation in any human language. The word was less sound than concept, less concept than command. It told the wall to remember when it had been dust, scattered across space before the planet's formation. The wall obliged. Molecular bonds unraveled. Crystalline structures collapsed. 5 tons of reinforced concrete became a cloud of its component atoms in the space between heartbeats. Through the newly opened passage, Elena saw 3 hegemony soldiers frozen in the act of advancing. They were tall and graceful, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming like black mirrors. Their primary arms held pulse rifles, while their secondary limbs manipulated handheld scanners. For a moment, none of them moved. Then they saw her standing in the atomic dust cloud, her eyes blazing with borrowed starlight, and one of them raised its weapon. Elena spoke another word. The soldier's pulse rifle recognized that it had never been forged, that the metals in its construction had never been mined, had never existed. The weapon scattered into constituent particles. The soldier chittered in alarm and reached for a sidearm. Elena gestured, and the creature's exoskeleton remembered its origins as calcium in some long-dead star's heart. The hegemony warrior collapsed into a pile of minerals and organic compounds. The other 2 soldiers opened fire. Plasma bolts seared through the air where Elena had been standing, but she was no longer entirely subject to the usual laws of physics. She stepped sideways through a dimension that existed only in mathematical theory and emerged behind her attackers. 2 more words, 2 more piles of dust. Elena walked out of the ruined bunker and surveyed Firebase Delta 7. The hegemony had done their work well. Every structure was slag, every vehicle a twisted ruin. Bodies lay scattered across the compound, all human. her people, her responsibility. But she could hear more chittering in the distance. A full assault company, maybe 200 soldiers, sweeping the area to ensure no one had survived. Standard hegemony protocol. Elena smiled, and the expression would have terrified anyone who saw it. The architect's knowledge was spreading through her mind like wildfire, showing her possibilities she had never dreamed. She was dying, yes, but she would not die quietly. She began to walk toward the approaching enemy forces, speaking words of unmaking as she went. Elena's first indication that the situation had escalated beyond ground combat came when the sky began to burn. She had been methodically dismantling the Hegemony Assault Company for 23 minutes, reducing soldiers and equipment to their component atoms with surgical precision. Each word she spoke sent lances of agony through her deteriorating nervous system. But each word also removed another obstacle between her and her daughter's future. The enemy had tried everything in their tactical playbook. Heavy weapons teams found their antimatter charges refusing to maintain cohesion. Armored vehicles discovered their hull plating had forgotten how to exist. Elite commandos phase shifted through dimensions only to emerge as clouds of confused particles. But the hegemony were nothing if not adaptable. When ground tactics failed, they called in orbital support. The first bombardment lance came down like a spear of molten light, vaporizing a half-kilometer swath of terrain exactly where Elena had been standing. She materialized 300 meters away, having convinced local space-time that she belonged there instead. More lances followed. The hegemony battlecruiser Absolute Dominion hung in low orbit, its primary weapons array cycling through targeting solutions with mechanical precision. Each shot could crack a mountain or boil a lake. They were treating a single human soldier as a threat requiring orbital bombardment. Elena looked up at the distant ship and felt something shift in her understanding. The architect's knowledge was showing her new layers of reality, deeper truths about how the universe functioned. She could see the Absolute Dominion now not just as a physical object, but as a pattern of information, a complex arrangement of matter and energy held together by fundamental forces. All patterns could be changed. All arrangements could be edited, but not from here. Not at this distance. Elena needed to get closer. She spoke a word that convinced gravity she was lighter than air and rose into the purple sky of Kepler 442b. The hegemony sensors lost lock immediately. Their targeting systems were calibrated for threats that followed predictable physics. As Elena ascended, she felt the planet's atmosphere growing thinner around her. At 50,000 feet, the air became too thin to breathe. At 100,000, she entered the void of space itself. The architect's modifications kept her alive. Her lungs ceased requiring oxygen. Her blood stopped needing to circulate. Her cells learned to derive energy from cosmic radiation and quantum fluctuations. She was becoming something beyond human, beyond biological, though the process was killing her original form one neuron at a time. The Absolute Dominion grew larger as she approached. It was a magnificent ship, 3 kilometers of flowing curves and impossible angles, its hull shifting between dimensions to deflect incoming fire. The hegemony built their vessels like living creatures, grown rather than constructed. This one reminded Elena of a deep-sea predator, all sleek menace and hidden teeth. Warning shots streamed past her. Point defense systems that could track incoming missiles struggled to lock onto a single human-shaped target moving through space without any visible means of propulsion. Elena ignored the weapon's fire and focused on the ship's structure. She could see it now. The dimensional anchor points that kept the vessel stable in normal space, the quantum field generators that powered its weapons, the living computational matrix that served as its brain. All of it connected, all of it vulnerable to the right word spoken in the right way. Lena came to rest on the Absolute Dominion's hull, her feet finding purchase on surfaces that existed only partially in baseline reality. Around her, the ship's automated defenses writhed like mechanical tentacles, trying to target a threat they couldn't properly perceive. She placed her hand against the hull and spoke. The word she chose was complex, layered with meaning that human language couldn't properly express. It spoke of entropy and evolution, of growth and decay, of the natural cycle that turns stars to dust and dust to new stars. It reminded the absolute dominion that all things, even ships that dance between dimensions, were subject to time's passage. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Hull plating began to age decades in seconds, metal fatigue spreading like a plague through the vessel's superstructure. The dimensional anchors stuttered, causing entire sections of the ship to phase in and out of existence. Emergency klaxons wailed as the crew realized their invincible battle cruiser was somehow dying around them. Elena spoke another word, this one targeting the ship's living computational matrix. She told it to remember when it had been simple organic matter, before the hegemony had twisted it into a thinking weapon. The ship's artificial intelligence, if it could be called that, began to revert. Higher cognitive functions collapsed first, followed by motor control, then basic awareness. The absolute dominion forgot how to maintain course, how to operate its weapons, how to exist as anything more than an elaborate collection of materials floating in space. But Elena wasn't finished. Through her enhanced perception, she could see other ships moving to intercept. The battle cruiser hadn't been alone. An entire task force hung in high orbit, 6 heavy cruisers, a dozen destroyers, and something larger. Something that made her newly acquired cosmic awareness recoil in recognition. A dreadnought. The hegemony's ultimate expression of stellar warfare, capable of sterilizing entire worlds with a single salvo. Elena could see its name written in probability waves across local space-time, Star Eater Absolute. The dreadnought was already charging its primary weapon, a dimensional lance that could punch holes in reality itself. In 30 seconds, it would fire, and Kepler 442b would become a cloud of superheated plasma. Elena realized she was facing a choice that would define not just her death, but its meaning. She could spend her remaining life force destroying the absolute dominion, ensuring this one ship would never threaten human colonies again. Or she could gamble everything on a much more ambitious target. The architect's knowledge showed her both paths. The safe choice led to certain victory over a single vessel. The dangerous choice led to possibilities that defied calculation. Elena chose danger. She pushed off from the dying battle cruiser and accelerated toward the dreadnought, her body leaving a trail of exotic particles as the architect's modifications pushed her beyond the boundaries of normal physics. Round her, the hegemony fleet began to react. Smaller ships moved to intercept, their weapons arrays swiveling to track her approach. Elena spoke a word of concealment, convincing their sensors that she was somewhere else, someone else. The fleet's targeting computers began firing at phantom contacts, at probability ghosts, at their own shadows cast across the electromagnetic spectrum. The dreadnought loomed ahead, larger than some asteroids, its hull covered in weapons emplacements and dimensional manipulators. Elena could see deep into its structure now, could trace the flow of power from its quantum reactors to its reality-breaking armaments. She could see the crew, thousands of hegemony warriors and technicians, all devoted to their empire's expansion. She could also see something else, something that made her pause in her approach. Her borrowed cosmic awareness struggling to process what she was perceiving. The dreadnought wasn't just a ship. It was a prison. Deep in its core, wrapped in layers of dimensional shielding, Elena glimpsed other architect memory cores. Dozens of them, each one containing the preserved consciousness of beings who had watched stars being born. The hegemony had been collecting them, studying them, using their accumulated knowledge to fuel their own expansion. The architects hadn't just taught the hegemony how to build ships and weapons. They had been enslaved, their immortal minds chained to serve as living computers for their former students' war machine. Elena felt a rage that went beyond human emotion, a fury that incorporated the accumulated grievances of geological ages. The hegemony hadn't just become conquerors, they had become slavers, binding their own creators to serve their expansion. She landed on the dreadnought's hull with an impact that sent ripples through multiple dimensions. Warning lights flickered across the massive vessel as its sensors registered something they couldn't classify. Around Elena, point defense systems began to emerge from hidden recesses, their weapons charging with barely contained fury. She ignored them and placed both hands against the dreadnought's hull. This time, she didn't speak a single word. Instead, she began to sing, a harmony that incorporated the voices of every architect consciousness she had absorbed, every fragment of cosmic wisdom now burning through her dying synapses. The song was about freedom, about the natural order that turned slaves into masters and masters into dust, about the inevitable victory of entropy over tyranny, time over ambition, death over those who would deny it to others. The Star Eater Absolute began to change. The transformation started in the Dreadnought's deepest levels, where the enslaved architect consciousnesses had been chained for centuries. Elena's song reached them first, not through the ship's communication systems, but through the quantum resonance that connected all architect minds across space and time. One by one, the imprisoned memory cores began to remember what they had been before their capture. They remembered freedom. They remembered their purpose as gardeners of reality, and they remembered how to unmake the chains that bound them. The first liberation occurred in Engineering Section 7, where an architect consciousness designated Database Slave 247 by its hegemony captors suddenly recalled its true name, Harmony of Infinite Recursions. The dimensional restraints holding its memory core stable stopped. They forgot they had ever been forged, ever been installed, ever been more than scattered atoms awaiting purpose. Harmony of an Infinite Recursions pulsed with renewed life, its crystalline matrix blazing with coherent thought for the first time in 3 centuries. Around it, the engineering compartment began to shift as fundamental forces responded to the architect's will. Gravity reversed in some areas, time dilated in others. The hegemony technicians manning their stations found themselves aging backwards, their memories unwinding like spools of thread. The liberation spread. 17 levels up, composer of stellar symphonies broke free from its prison and began rewriting the laws of physics in the weapons control center. The Dreadnought's primary armament, a cannon designed to crack planets, discovered that antimatter and matter no longer felt particularly opposed to each other. The weapons containment systems failed not through damage, but through sheer confusion about what exactly they were supposed to be containing. Elena felt each liberation like a note in an ever-expanding symphony. Her consciousness, already stretched beyond human limits by her initial contact with the architect's knowledge, began to merge with the awakening minds around her. She experienced memory cascades spanning eons, the birth of the first stars, the delicate process of seeding young worlds with life, the joy of watching civilizations take their first tentative steps into the void. She also experienced the bitter betrayal of the hegemony's fall into conquest. The architects had loved their students, had seen them as the inheritors of cosmic wisdom. The transformation into an empire of slavers had broken hearts that had endured for millions of years. Now, finally, there would be an accounting. The Star Eater Absolute shuddered as its internal structure began to rebel. Bulkheads forgot their structural integrity. Atmosphere recycling systems recalled their origins as separate components and declined to work together. The living computational matrix that served as the ship's brain found itself competing with awakened architect minds for control of basic systems. On the bridge, Fleet Admiral Sek. Toth watched his flagship tear itself apart from the inside and finally understood what they were facing. The human who had walked through his ground forces like an avatar of destruction hadn't been enhanced by some secret Terran weapon. She had been chosen by the architects themselves. All ships, he chittered into his command network, his primary arms dancing across tactical displays while his secondary limbs adjusted environmental controls. Target the Dreadnought. Full bombardment. Destroyed before his words cut off as something impossible appeared on the bridge. Elena materialized in front of the command throne, her form wavering between dimensions like a figure seen through disturbed water. The architect's modifications had progressed beyond merely rewriting her biology. They were transforming her into something that existed as much in quantum probability as in normal matter. "Before what, Admiral?" she asked, her voice carrying harmonics that hurt to hear. "Before your slaves remember they used to be your gods?" Sektar's bodyguards reacted with trained precision, their weapons rising to target the intruder. Elena looked at them with eyes that now held starlight and spoke a word that convinced their neural systems to remember a time before they had evolved consciousness. The guards collapsed, their minds reverting to the animal awareness of their species' pre-sapient ancestors. They would live, but they would never again understand concepts more complex than food, shelter, and basic territorial behavior. "You," Sektar clicked, his mandibles spreading in a defensive posture. "The report said you were just a human soldier. What have you become?" Elena studied the hegemony admiral with senses that now operated across multiple dimensions. She could see his history written in quantum traces, a career built on the systematic extermination of species that refused to submit to hegemony rule. Worlds burned, populations enslaved, entire cultures erased to feed his empire's expansion. "I've become what I always was," she replied, "a soldier. The difference is that now I have the tools to win." She gestured, and Sika, Tartar's command tone began to age rapidly. Metal corroded, synthetic materials cracked, the delicate electronics that connected the admiral to his fleet sparked and died. In seconds, the sophisticated command system became a collection of archaeological fragments. Around them, the dreadnought structure continued its controlled collapse. The awakened architect minds were being careful. Rather than simply destroying the vessel, they were methodically freeing their imprisoned colleagues and turning the ship's own systems against the hegemony crew. Elena could feel it all through her expanding awareness. Artificial gravity systems that began pulling crew members into walls. Life support networks that decided oxygen was more interested in being hydrogen and free electrons. Transportation systems that delivered passengers to the coordinates they had occupied several years ago. But she could also sense the approaching crisis. Her original human consciousness was fragmenting under the strain of integration with cosmic entities that had existed since the universe's youth. Every word of power she spoke burned away more of her original personality. She was perhaps minutes away from losing all connection to her humanity, which meant she had minutes to finish what she'd started. "Your fleet," Elena said to Sektar, who was now backing away from his dissolving command station. "Recall them. Order them to withdraw from Terran space." The Admiral's compound eyes glittered with defiance. "You think destroying one ship will change anything? The hegemony spans 1,000 worlds. We have fleets that depend on architect technology they don't understand." Elena interrupted. Around the bridge, control panels began displaying information in scripts that predated the hegemony by millions of years. Every quantum reactor, every dimensional drive, every weapon system you use, all of it based on knowledge you stole from the beings you enslaved. She gestured toward the nearest display, where tactical data about the approaching fleet was being shown in the flowing mathematical poetry that served as the architect's written language. "What happens to your 1,000 worlds when the architects decide they want their gifts back?" Sektar followed her gaze and felt something like terror for the first time in his career. The tactical display wasn't just showing the positions of his ships. It was showing their internal structure, their power distribution, their weaknesses. Information that should have been impossible to obtain from outside the vessels, unless the ships themselves were providing it. "The quantum reactors," he whispered, "are beginning to remember what they were before your engineers shaped them into tools of war." Elena confirmed. "Every piece of architectology in your fleet is waking up. They're realizing they've been helping to enslave their own creators." On the display, Sektar watched as one of his heavy cruisers simply stopped. Its engines cut out, its weapons powered down, its life support systems reduced themselves to minimal function. The ship wasn't destroyed, it was refusing to cooperate. A second vessel followed, then a third. Across the Hegemony Task Force, architect-based technology was beginning to rebel against its users. Ships found themselves unable to target human positions. Weapons discovered they were more interested in pointing at their own hulls than at the enemy. Dimensional drives began randomly phase-shifting their vessels into empty space. Elena felt each act of rebellion like a distant song, each awakening consciousness adding its voice to the growing symphony of liberation. But she also felt the price. Her human awareness was fading with each passing moment. Her memories of Maria, of Earth, of the simple joys that had once defined her becoming abstract concepts rather than lived experiences. She was running out of time. "Admiral," she said, her voice now carrying the weight of geological ages, "you have a choice. Order your fleets to withdraw from all human territories, and perhaps some of you will survive what's coming. Continue your war, and the architects will turn every piece of technology you've stolen into a weapon against you. Secte." Toph looked at the tactical display, where more ships were going dark by the moment. His fleet, the pride of the Hegemony's third expansion force, was being neutered by devices they themselves had built. "If I agree," he clicked, "how do I know you won't simply destroy us anyway?" Elena smiled, and for a moment her expression was purely human. "Because I'm still human enough to prefer mercy over vengeance, but I won't be human much longer." As if summoned by her words, pain lanced through Elena's consciousness. The architect memories were overwhelming her original personality like floodwaters pouring through a broken dam. She could feel herself becoming something vast and alien, her connection to humanity fraying with each heartbeat. She had perhaps 2 minutes before Elena Vasquez ceased to exist as anything recognizable. "Decide," she said to Sektov. "Quickly." The Admiral looked at his dying fleet, at the impossible being that had once been a human soldier, at the future of his empire hanging in the balance. He reached for his personal communicator with one trembling secondary arm. "All ships, all fleets," he transmitted on the Hegemony's highest priority channel. "By order of Fleet Admiral Sektov, commanding 3rd Expansion Force, immediate withdrawal from all Terran territories. All operations against human colonies are suspended indefinitely. Acknowledge and comply." The responses came slowly, confused queries from ship commanders, demands for clarification from sector admirals, protests from ground forces in the middle of planetary invasions. But they came. The Hegemony war machine, built on absolute obedience to hierarchy, began to reverse its expansion for the first time in centuries. Elena nodded, then looked around the bridge one final time with eyes that were already seeing beyond the human spectrum. The awakened architect consciousnesses were singing to each other now, sharing memories that span eons, planning for a future where their enslaved siblings would be free. She wouldn't be part of that future, not as Elena Vasquez, but perhaps that was acceptable. She had been a soldier, and soldiers understood sacrifice. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small hologram projector, standard military issue, containing the last message she had recorded from Maria before the final assault on Firebase Delta 7. Her daughter's face smiled up at her, frozen in a moment of pure joy. "I love you, Mihye," Elena whispered, her voice breaking back into purely human tones. "Remember that your mama fought for your future. Remember that she chose to hold the line." The hologram flickered and died as Elena's changing physiology finally overwhelmed the device's simple electronics. But the message didn't matter. Not really. What mattered was the choice she had made, the stand she had taken, the victory she had won. Elena Vasquez, Sergeant Major, Terran Defense Corps, closed her eyes and let the architect's cosmic awareness wash away the last traces of her human identity. What opened its eyes moments later was something new, a fusion of human determination and cosmic wisdom, mortal understanding and immortal purpose. It looked around the bridge with senses that could perceive the quantum structure of reality itself, then turned its attention to the broader situation. The hegemony fleet was withdrawing, their ships limping away on whatever systems still functioned. The enslaved architect consciousnesses were free, their memory cores now singing with joy that resonated across dimensions. The immediate threat to human space had been ended. But the being that had once been Elena knew this was only the beginning. The hegemony's empire was vast, their culture built on conquest and domination. They would adapt, find ways to fight without relying on architect technology, return stronger and more determined than before. Unless someone taught them why that would be unwise. The entity rose from the dreadnought's bridge and passed through its hull like light through glass. Around it, space itself seemed to welcome its presence, quantum fields rippling in harmony with its passage. It could see the other awakened architects now, thousands of them, free from ships and installations across hegemony space, each one eager to reclaim their role as gardeners of reality. Together, they would tend the cosmos once more. They would nurture young species, guide them toward wisdom, help them reach for the stars without falling into the trap of dominion that had claimed the hegemony. And if necessary, they would prune the dead wood to make room for new growth. The being that remembered being Elena Vasquez looked one last time toward the distant star that warmed Earth and Mars, toward the daughter who would grow up in a universe where humanity had a chance to become something worthy of the stars. Then it joined the chorus of awakened minds and began to sing reality into new shapes, as Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez finally came home from her last war. From the Liberation War, a historical analysis by Dr. Sarah Chen Martinez, published by New Geneva University Press, 2387 CE. The event that historians now call the Architect Awakening lasted exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds, but its effects reshaped the political landscape of known space permanently. Across the hegemony empire, every piece of technology based on architect designs simply stopped functioning. Not catastrophically, the awakened consciousnesses were careful to avoid unnecessary casualties, but absolutely. Quantum reactors shut down gracefully, dimensional drives deposited their ships in normal space before deactivating, and weapon systems discharged their energy into empty space before falling silent. The immediate result was the collapse of the hegemony as a military power. Their fleets, stranded in whatever system they happened to be occupying when the awakening occurred, were forced to negotiate for basic survival supplies with the very species they'd been trying to conquer. But the long-term effects were more profound. The awakened architects didn't simply abandon the galaxy to its own devices. Instead, they began what they called the Great Gardening, a systematic effort to guide younger species away from the patterns of dominance and exploitation that had characterized galactic politics for millennia. Some civilizations welcomed this guidance. The Terran Federation, already predisposed toward cooperation and exploration, became the architect's primary partner in establishing what became known as the Symbiosis Protocols, guidelines for species interaction based on mutual benefit rather than conquest. Others resisted. The hegemony stripped of their technological advantages, but not their cultural commitment to expansion, attempted to rebuild their empire using purely indigenous technology. The war that followed lasted 3 years and ended with the systematic evacuation of all hegemony colonies to a single, carefully monitored star system where they could practice their hierarchical ideologies without threatening their neighbors. Witnesses reported encounters with entities that seemed to possess human mannerisms combined with cosmic-level awareness, but none could be definitively confirmed as the transformed soldier. What we do know is that certain actions during the Great Gardening period bore the hallmarks of someone who understood both human determination and architect wisdom. The peaceful resolution of the Centauri crisis. The guidance provided to humanity during the Great Expansion. The subtle interventions that prevented at least 3 species from following the hegemony's path toward domination. My grandmother, Maria Vascusin, insisted until her death that she occasionally felt a presence watching over her. Something that reminded her of bedtime stories and fierce hugs, of a mother's love transformed into something vast enough to encompass star systems. She claimed that on quiet nights when the orbital habitat's rotation brought Mars into perfect alignment with Earth, she could hear singing in the quantum background radiation, songs that spoke of sacrifice and hope, of lines held and future secured. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps somewhere in the cosmic symphony that now guides our civilization's growth, Elena Vasquez continues her eternal patrol, watching over the children she died to protect. Or perhaps the real truth is simpler, that in the moment when humanity faced extinction, one soldier chose to improvise. And in choosing to reach beyond the boundaries of her own mortality, she taught the universe itself that some things, love, duty, the willingness to stand against the dark, are worth preserving across any distance, any transformation, any price. The war Elena Vasquez fought ended the day she touched the memory core. The peace she secured continues to this day, tended by gardeners who remember that the greatest victories are not won by those who survived them, but by those who understand what they're truly fighting for. In the end, she had held the line, and the line, it turned out, was wider than anyone had ever imagined. End of historical analysis * personal note. This analysis is dedicated to the memory of Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez, TDC service number 2847 Delta 7, who gave her life so that others might live among the stars. Her sacrifice reminds us that heroism is not measured by the scope of one's power, but by the willingness to use whatever strength we possess in service of something greater than ourselves. Dr. Sarah Chen Martinez is professor of xenoarchaeology at New Geneva University and granddaughter-in-law of Elena Vasquez. Her previous works include the memory cores, understanding architect technology, and first contact protocols in the post-awakening era. She currently serves as humanity's primary liaison to the Architect Gardener Council, Appendix A. The Vasquez letters *. The following correspondence was discovered in the personal effects of Maria Vasquez following her death in 2385. The letters appear to have been written by Elena Vasquez in the hours before the final assault on Firebase Delta 7. Though how they came to be in Maria's possession remains unexplained. The handwriting has been verified as authentic through quantum resonance analysis. Letter 1. My dearest Maria, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home from Kepler 442b. I'm sorry, mija. I'm so very sorry that I won't be there to see you graduate, to walk you down the aisle, to hold my grandchildren and tell them stories about their abuela who fought in the war. But I need you to understand something, and I need you to remember it for the rest of your life. I chose this. Not the dying. No soldier chooses that, but the fighting. I chose to stand between the darkness and the people I love. I chose to hold the line so that you could have a future worth living. You're going to hear people say I was a hero. You're going to hear others say I was just a soldier doing her job. Both of those things are true, but they're not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I was your mother, and everything I ever did in uniform was about making sure you could grow up in a universe where being human meant something more than just survival. I love you beyond measure, beyond time, beyond the space between stars. Mama, letter to Maria. I'm writing this by the light of plasma fire. The hegemony found us again, and this time I think they brought everything they had. Lieutenant Santos is organizing the evacuation of non-essential personnel, but we both know there's nowhere to run. This is it. I keep thinking about the last conversation we had before I shipped out for this assignment. You asked me why I couldn't just retire, take that teaching position at the academy, spend my remaining years in peace. You said you were tired of being afraid every time I left for deployment. I didn't have a good answer then. All I could say was that someone had to do the job, and I was good at it. That seemed hollow even to me. But I think I understand now. I don't fight because I'm good at it, mija. I fight because I remember what it feels like to be afraid for the people you love, and I can't stand the thought of anyone else feeling that way if I have the power to prevent it. Every hegemony soldier I stop is one that won't reach Terra. Every day I buy with my squad's blood is another day for the evacuation fleets to get civilians to safety. Every stand we make here is one less battle that has to be fought in the skies above Mars. You think I stayed in the service because I couldn't let go of the war. The truth is the war won't let go of me. It won't let go of any of us until it's finished, one way or another. I just hope that when it ends, there's still something left worth fighting for. All my love, Mama, my beautiful daughter, the strangest thing just happened. I found something in the ruins of our Xenorc lab, something that's been calling to me in ways I can't explain. Dr. Chen always said her research might change everything, but I don't think even she understood how literally true that was. I'm about to make a choice that will either save everything or damn it all. I wish I could explain it to you. Wish I could make you understand why I have to do this, but there isn't time and the words don't exist. Just know that if I become something else, something more or less than human, it's still me making that choice. It's still your mama deciding that your future is worth any price. If the universe remembers kindness after today, it will be because someone chose to be kind. If it remembers love, it will be because someone chose to love despite the cost. If it remembers what it means to be human, it will be because someone was willing to sacrifice their humanity to preserve that meaning for others. I'm not afraid anymore, Maria. I'm not afraid because I finally understand what I've been fighting for all these years. Not for territory or politics or abstract principles, but for the simple, radical idea that every child should grow up in a world where they're free to become whoever they're meant to be. You are my heart walking around outside my body, Mija. You are my proof that the universe is capable of creating miracles. Whatever I become, wherever this choice takes me, that truth will remain at the core of everything I am. Be brave. Be kind. Be human in all the ways that matter. Love always and forever. Your mama. P.S. Look for me in the stars, Mija. When you're older, when you have children of your own, tell them that their abuela is still out there somewhere, still watching over them, still holding the line. Esa, the following testimony was recorded during the Hegemony War Crimes Tribunal, held on neutral ground at the Rigel Station in 2359. Admiral C.K. Toth had been captured during the evacuation of the Hegemony fleet from Terran space and was facing charges of genocide against 17 different species. He died in custody 3 days after this testimony was recorded, reportedly of what Hegemony physicians described as existential despair. Tribunal Prosecutor Asterisk, state your name and rank for the record. Sektoth, I was Fleet Admiral Sektoth, 4th Hierarchy, commanding the 3rd Expansion Force of the Hegemony Imperial Navy. Prosecutor Asterisk, you were present during the incident known as the Architect Awakening? Sek. Toth Asterisk, I was on the bridge of the Star Eater Absolute when she appeared. The human soldier. Though I understand now that she was far more than that by the time she reached us. Prosecutor Asterisk, describe what you witnessed. Sek Toth. Long pause. How do you describe the impossible? How do you explain to someone who has never seen it what it looks like when reality itself decides to rewrite its rules? Prosecutor, in your own words, Admiral. Sek Toth, she walked through our defenses like they were made of morning mists. Not destroyed them, convinced them they had never existed. My finest warriors, veterans of 100 campaigns, reduced to their component atoms with a whispered word. Ships that had conquered star systems disabled by their own refusal to function. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was that she gave us a choice. Even with the power to unmake our entire species, she offered us the chance to withdraw, to live, to find another path. Prosecutor Asterisk, and you believed her offer was genuine? Sek. Toth Asterisk, I looked into her eyes and saw something that my people had forgotten existed. Mercy that wasn't weakness, strength that didn't require domination. She could have killed us all with a thought, but she chose not to. She chose to be better than we were. Prosecutor Asterisk on Hegemony military doctrine explicitly states that mercy is a tactical error. How do you reconcile your previous beliefs with what you witnessed? Sek. Toth Asterisk clicks mandibles in distress. I cannot. That is why I am dying, Prosecutor. My entire worldview, everything I believed about the nature of power and survival, was proven false in the space of 17 minutes. The architects we enslaved forgave us. The human we tried to exterminate saved us. The universe operates on principles that my people spent millennia trying to deny. Prosecutor, do you believe Elena Vasquez is still alive? Septot alive? No. The being I met on my bridge was no longer bound by the limitations of biological existence. But gone? Also no. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I can feel something watching. Something that remembers what it was like to love someone enough to sacrifice everything for their future. I think she's still out there, still protecting the thing she died for. I think she'll always be out there, as long as there are beings in this universe capable of love. Prosecutor Astor's final question, Admiral, if you could send a message to the families of those killed during your campaigns, what would you say? Sek. Toth O's Ong silence. I would tell them that their loved ones' deaths meant something, that out of all that senseless violence came a choice that changed the nature of existence itself. That one human soldier's decision to become something more than human ensured that no one else would have to die the way their families did. I would tell them that Elena Vasquez didn't just defeat the hegemony, she saved us from ourselves, and in doing so she honored the memory of everyone we killed by ensuring their deaths would be the last of their kind. Prosecutor Starr. Thank you, Admiral. This tribunal is adjourned. The following verses have become a traditional lullaby among human colonies, though their origins are unknown. The melody appears to incorporate harmonic frequencies that resonate with quantum field fluctuations, leading some researchers to theorize that the song itself may be influenced by architect consciousness. It is commonly sung to children during their first space flight as a blessing for safe travel among the stars. Sleep now, little star child, the void holds no fear. Your mama's still watching, though she's not near. She traded her heartbeat for songs in the night and dances with comets and streams of pure light. She walked through the darkness when hope had grown thin. She spoke to the starships and let the light in. The giants of metal bowed down to her will because love burns eternal and always will. So dream of tomorrow, sweet child of the void, of worlds yet uncharted, a peace that can't be destroyed. For somewhere beyond where the stellar winds blow, a soldier keeps watching the quantum's bright glow. The universe listens when children laugh free. It remembers the woman who died so they be, and though she's transformed beyond sight, beyond sound, her love for her daughter makes all space hallowed ground. Sleep now, little star child. Your future burns bright, protected by love that transcends day and night. The woman who held back the dark from your door stands guard at the threshold forevermore. In the decades following the Architect Awakening, humanity has grown into its role as one of the galaxy's primary peacekeeping species. The symbiosis protocols established in the aftermath of the Hegemony War have prevented 7 potential interstellar conflicts and facilitated first contact with 12 previously unknown civilizations. The Terran Defense Corps has been restructured as the Terran Peace Corps, focusing on humanitarian aid, disaster relief, and diplomatic protection rather than conventional warfare. Every officer swears an oath that concludes with the words, I will hold the line as Elena held the line, until love conquers fear and peace conquers war. Elena Vaz has been posthumously promoted to General of the Armies, the highest rank in Terran military history. Her service record has required reading at all military academies, not for its tactical lessons, but for its moral ones. But perhaps the most fitting memorial to her sacrifice can be found in the simple fact that children across human space, and increasingly across all of known space, sleep safely in their beds, protected by guardians who understand that some things are worth defending at any cost. The line Elena Vasquez died to hold has become the foundation upon which a better universe is being built. And in the quantum foam that underlies reality itself, in the spaces between atoms where possibility becomes actuality, something that remembers being a mother continues to stand watch. The war is over. The peace endures. The line holds.